Grand jury has just reported out a 38-count indictment against Cornelius Beckley, 27 years old, for the March 26th shooting at the Cameo Night Club. We identified him through multiple sources as the initial shooter, and also with a gun shooting it was Deondre Davis, also identified by multiple sources as a shooter. As many of you know, Deondre Davis passed away a couple days ago. I need to explain this very briefly to you, and then we asked members of the Cincinnati Police Department to be here today to answer any specific questions as to the investigation that they can. In Ohio, we have a legal theory called transferred intent. And basically what it means is if you, for instance, if Julie and I walk into a bank with guns and we're going to rob the bank, and a guard shoots Julie and kills her, I can be charged with her murder. So when we met with homicide probably a week and a half ago, we told them that anyone in that bar that you see or can identify with a gun shooting it, we're going to charge them with murder. Deondre Davis, who is now deceased, would have been facing an identical indictment as Cornelius Beckley. Beckley is facing, if convicted of all charges, 230 years in prison. I want to commend the Cincinnati Police Department, Chief Isaacs, and his entire department for the relentless pursuit of justice in this case. They did a remarkable job. This is one of those situations, again, though, that we have where people don't talk, and they had to work very, very hard to gather the evidence in this case that led to this indictment. We are still investigating. Cincinnati Police is still investigating. We know we have at least a third gun. We do not know who the shooter was with that gun, the 9mm.
My question is this: the transferred intent. Is there ballistics that connects?
It doesn't matter.
I'm saying.
They're still doing ballistic. They're doing ballistic tests on this stuff now.
It doesn't matter if what bullet hit
Doesn't matter.
O'Brien.
Right.
It doesn't matter. You've all contributed to what happened at Cameo.
Yeah, his fatal shot was a through and through, and that bullet's not going to be recovered. So. But it doesn't matter. It's for felony murder charges. Once they went in there with guns and started shooting, if someone dies during the course of that event, that is felony murder.
This is sort of like if you drive the getaway car in a murder, you're still as complicit as if you pulled the trigger.
Well, it's not necessarily complicity. It literally is. I know it's a technical thing. It literally is transferred intent. That you had the same intent as the person who killed whoever. It doesn't.
Have you used this before?
Yes,
okay.
yes. We use it all the time.
The third person, if there is a third person with a 9mm, would they also be charged with murder?
This exact indictment.
Joe, so was Beckley the very first guy to fire the?
We believe that's true. Yeah. This is, there's a lot of theories floating around. I've heard about why this started. But basically, it sounds like it doesn't matter why it started. The motivation for this is not an element of the crime. So it's interesting to know why would they do something like this in a crowded nightclub, but that is not an element of the crime. It was two groups, one from Madisonville, one from Price Hill, and the Madisonville people had just left a funeral for a friend of theirs, and they were upset that the Price Hill people were there, and they're aiming their fingers at each other like they've got a fake gun, a gun in their hand. And this particular defendant then got up on a little stage, a riser area, and started shooting his gun.
So, the family of Deondre Davis says that there's no way that he had any intent to shoot anyone. What is your response to that? There's no way that he had intended to kill anyone, that he's actually really good friends with the person who ended up dying as well. What is your response to that?
It's his family. I mean, it's really hard for people, you know, to accept, especially when your son has died. It's hard to sometimes accept what we believe the facts to be, but we have witnesses that saw him do that.
Are there any more, I'm trying to really think how to phrase this, did all three of the people, and you identified the third person that you still haven't found, they account for all the shots fired? Or are there any more potential suspects?
Well, I guess somebody could have had a revolver in there because they don't expel shell casings. But that's what we think we had.
Joe, this is a kind of pretty powerful message you're sending, which is we don't need the gun in your hand. We don't need the ballistics to match. If you're going to go into a place like this and leave with people shot and bodies and not care what you've done, we're gonna do something about it anyway.
We are, and both Beckley and Davis, they were under disability. They were not allowed to be carrying anything, but both were.
So Spikes was not a target? They didn't go
we don't have any evidence of that. You know, people say this was a mass shooting. It was a shootout. Okay, this wasn't like somebody going into school and try to create a body count. These were guys shooting at each other, and many innocent people were in between the two.
Was the video working inside the club?
No.
No video.
No.
What do you say about that, Joe? I know Rob Richardson in the mayoral race has talked about a model in Detroit where for a club to operate, the video has to be working. And I mean, is there any conversation about that? A lot of people wonder why that video didn't work.
Well, my understanding is it was taken from the nightclub because of another incident that happened, and they were reviewing it for the other incident, and so it was not functioning.
The owner of the club had said that there was no two lines, there was no VIP line. We can say for sure there was.
I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about that.
So we have two competing groups that were angry at each other. Can you explain in detail the background that you understand at this point?
I can't understand this behavior at all, more or less the motivation. I just cannot understand how somebody can. You know, Cincinnati's a very safe place if you don't hang around with people trafficking in drugs. It's a pretty safe place. If you talk to the coroner, she'll tell you upwards of 80–90% of the autopsies they perform, they test positive for drugs. Generally speaking, if you're not in the drug trade, you're not hanging around with drug dealers, Cincinnati's pretty safe. Cameo had a lot of people in there that were not good people, and they were dealing in drugs. They have multiple convictions for dealing in drugs. And don't get me wrong, not all of them. There were some people who had nothing. But the majority had criminal records.
So there is a third person you're still looking for?
The police are looking for him. I'm not looking for him.
So we have 3 weapons and maybe a revolver. Is that what, am I hearing that?
No. We have 25 caliber. What was Davis's weapon? Do you guys know?
40 caliber.
40 caliber was Davis. And a 9mm who we don't know who the shooter was on that.
Any responsibility for the club owner himself in this? What is his overall responsibility here?
Do you want to come up?
You know, when we talk about the club owner and we talk about the bars, we have to remember that that process is controlled by the state liquor board. For us to, it takes a very long time and very in-depth investigations to hold bars accountable for inappropriate behavior and conduct, and we have to sell our case to the state liquor board. Right now, we have the best case scenario. We know that there's been a history of problematic behavior at Cameo's. Mr. Rogers voluntarily surrendered his liquor license. The place is closed. That is the best case scenario for us. I think anything else that will come out of it, if there is a civil suit by the surviving individuals in that club, I think that's where there'll be further accountability on the part of Mr. Rogers.
Lieutenant Colonel, quick question I have. To parents watching who have children that go out to clubs and to people who go to clubs, are there other places in Cincinnati that you've identified where you would suggest have histories similar to that? Can you name them, or what's that conversation like?
I mean, I think it would be unfair for me to single them out. Are there places that we are concerned about that are crime attractors? Of course. If you're going to an establishment and they're wanting you and patting you down, that may not be the place that you want to spend your leisure time.
Colonel, was there a nuisance abatement case already being formed for Cameo, considering the problems prior to this?
There was not an actual case. What there was dialogue between the District 2 commander and Mr. Julian Rogers. Mr. Rogers has been in the bar business for a long time. I personally know Mr. Rogers. We've had conversations on numerous occasions. There had been a significant lapse in criminal conduct at the club, but early March we had a stabbing, which led us to renew that conversation with Mr. Rogers to go back in and want to assess his protocol that he had in place for the security of his club. And you have to remember, a lot of these are mere suggestions. We give them suggestions. If they don't comply with those suggestions, then we present that to the state liquor board when we object to the license. But those are not criminal law violations.
How did the guns get in?
Sir, we're still working on that. There's still a lot of information we don't know, and you know, it's a bifurcated process. Very concerned about the criminal process and the indictments that Mr. Deters' office was able to obtain, but we're also, now that we're at this point, we'll look at our administrative investigation through our vice unit in conjunction with OIU to see what those administrative violations may have occurred.
We have attorneys that say that, you know, there's not enough evidence to connect, you know, the men with the actual gun and that they were the ones who shot. You know, what is the evidence that shows that the men?
Roseanne, we're not going to discuss that today.
You have a lot of eyewitnesses, though, don't you?
Yeah, we're not going to discuss facts of the criminal case.
Was Spikes, this may be irrelevant, but was Spikes in the Madisonville crowd or the Price Hill crowd?
Price Hill.
Not Spikes.
Price. You're talking about the
Beckley.
deceased?
Yeah, well, all of them, actually.
Yeah.
He's in Madisonville.
Beckley was a Madisonville guy.
And Spikes was in the Price Hill?
Correct.
Although, again, Joe, you're
But it wasn't, I don't think he was targeted,
Yeah.
okay?
can you talk a little more about that? I know, is there a turf war then happening between?
No, I don't think so.
Was it all?
They're
drunk?
just strangers, you know. Someone disrespected somebody. It's, to explain this behavior is way past me.
Colonel, I wanted to ask you about OTR Live, his other club down on Main Street. Have you had conversations with him? Somebody had conversations with him about changes there to make sure that, because they had some interesting attractions that were going to be there, then of course he moved that.
Right. That is definitely on our list to do if we have not already done so. I know the District 1 commander has reached out to take a look at what protocols are in place at Mr. Rogers' other club that he currently owns, OTR Live, down in, I believe, on 12th Street. So the last thing that we want to occur is the senseless violence that occurred at Cameo to displace itself down at OTR Live. And we will do everything we can to make sure that that does not happen.
I wanted to say one other thing, and that is that when criminal investigations went into that scene, that could be an overwhelming scene to everything that they had to do. I just thought maybe you would want to comment on what they had to do to analyze that scene and get exactly the right evidence and that led to this.
I think it's just a testament to the men and women of our criminalistics unit. They were presented with a overwhelming, daunting task, but once we stabilized the scene, we triaged it, the victims were transported, then we can slow it down. And we want to make sure we do it right, and we did it right, and that information was presented to the prosecutor's office, resulting in this indictment.
Do you believe that Davis and Beckley had walked into the club intending to kill someone that night before they walked in? Or did that happen during?
I can't speak to that, ma'am.
Is there
It
any evidence?
It doesn't matter. It can be instantaneous.
Is there any evidence or anything that would suggest O'Brien Spikes was shooting at any point during this exchange?
No. And I want to say one last thing, and we're going to break this, but everyone wants to blame the security measures, the owner of the bar, things of that nature. There were criminals in this place with guns shooting at them. That is who is to blame. You know, everyone wants to find an excuse, but keep your eye on the ball here. There were criminals in there with guns shooting randomly. And innocent people were hurt. Thank God the first responders did the job they did. There could have been a lot more dead than two. Anyway, thank you very much. Yeah.
About the Matty Hart case, any arrest imminent in that case?
We're actively investigating that. We have videos, and we're going through that now. I've got 4 assistants screening all the videos.
And then the search for Baber in the Kenton Street, that was certainly a little overshadowed by Cameo. Where does that stand?
That's they're actively searching for him.
Can you comment on that a little bit? We haven't had a chance to talk to you about just the nature of that violence. Really something.
It's unbelievable. I mean, 3 incidents in such a short time in this city of just senseless violence. It's it could be a long summer. Thank you.